had always been the kind of person who studied hard. I knew hundreds of English words. I understood grammar rules better than most of my classmates. People even said I had a good accent. They told me I sounded natural. That word used to make me feel proud, but deep down, I knew the truth. I could speak, but I couldn't understand. At first, I didn't want to admit it. I told myself I just needed more practice. I blamed the speaker's accent, the speed of their voice, the noise in the background. But every time I turned on a podcast, I froze. I could catch the first sentence, maybe the second. Then everything turned into sound without meaning, like wind passing through leaves. I'd pause the audio, rewind, and listen again. Nothing helped. Watching movies was even worse. Without subtitles, I felt lost. It wasn't just about fast speech or slang. Even the simple scenes of people ordering food, saying goodbye, laughing at something small, I couldn't follow. I didn't know when to laugh. I didn't know what they were really saying. I stared at the screen and saw words, not feelings. Like watching a movie on mute. Phone calls were the most painful. One time, I picked up a call from a tourist asking for directions. His voice was friendly, slow, and clear. But the moment he spoke, my brain shut down. My heart raced. I said, "Sorry, can you repeat 3 times?" He looked confused. In the end, he thanked me politely and walked away. I stood there, phone still in my hand, face burning. I wasn't a beginner, but I felt like one. Again, it was more than embarrassing. It was a shame, because I had worked so hard. I had studied for years, but in real conversations, I was silent. Trapped. It felt like I had built a house with no doors. I could decorate the walls with vocabulary and grammar, but I couldn't get out. I couldn't connect. The worst part was how invisible it was. No one around me knew I struggled. My friends thought I was good at English. I had passed my exams. I even helped others practice speaking, but I avoided anything that required real listening. I nodded at fast conversations and hoped no one would ask me questions. I smiled during group discussions and laughed when others laughed, even when I didn't get the joke. I became good at pretending, and that scared me. One evening, I sat alone in a quiet cafe. It was a Tuesday. I remember the soft music playing in the background and the way the steam rose from my cup of tea. 2 foreign students were sitting nearby. They were talking about their weekend. Their voices were gentle, not too fast. The topic was simple: movies, dinner, plans for the next day. There were no difficult words. I recognized every single one, but somehow I didn't understand. It was like my brain could see the puzzle pieces, but couldn't put them together. The words entered my ears and fell apart before reaching my mind. I stared at my cup and tried to catch one full sentence. Just one. Nothing. I felt like I was standing behind a glass wall, watching a world I couldn't reach, a language I knew but couldn't live in. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't improving. I was repeating. I was stuck. All this time, I had focused on reading, writing, and grammar. But listening, I had avoided it because it made me feel small, because it reminded me that I wasn't as fluent as I claimed to be, because it showed me the truth. I picked up my phone, opened the podcast app, and scrolled through dozens of episodes I had downloaded but never listened to. I stared at the titles: Real English Conversations, Everyday English Listening, Train Your Ears. I had saved them, hoping someday I would feel ready. But someday, it will never come. That night, walking home, I asked myself a question, a quiet question, one I had never said out loud. How long will I keep pretending that reading subtitles is enough? The next morning, I made a decision. No more excuses, no more hiding behind subtitles or avoiding phone calls. I was going to train my ears, no matter how hard it felt. I didn't have a fancy method or a teacher guiding me. All I had was an idea. 30 days, one video a day, no subtitles allowed. I opened YouTube and searched for English listening for beginners. Even though I wasn't a beginner, I needed to start from the beginning again. I clicked on a video that was only 2 minutes long. It was titled Ordering Coffee in English. That sounded safe enough, familiar, nothing scary. I opened a clean notebook, took a deep breath, and pressed play. The first few seconds flew past me like a train I couldn't catch. I paused, rewound, played again. I tried to write down what I heard, but the sounds slipped away. I caught a word here and there. Flat, small, please. The rest, just noise. I didn't give up. I played it again and again, the same 2 minutes over and over. I must have listened to that tiny video 10 times. At some point, I stopped trying to catch every word and just focused on the rhythm, the pauses, the tone of voice. I started to recognize patterns, even if I didn't get every detail. I wrote notes in the margins, guesses, possible meanings, words I thought I had heard before. It was slow, almost painful. My head hurt. My eyes were tired. I kept checking the time, shocked to see that only 20 minutes had passed. 20 minutes for 2 minutes of video. But then something happened. In the middle of the video, the barista said something that made me stop completely. She smiled and said, "You don't need to understand everything. You need to keep listening." It was part of a casual conversation in the video, just a friendly sentence meant to encourage the customer. But for me, it felt like someone had whispered those words directly into my chest. Like the video knew exactly what I needed to hear. I replayed that sentence again and again It was the first time I had understood a full English sentence without subtitles, without translation, without panic. I grabbed my pen and wrote it down carefully, word by word. You don't need to understand everything. You need to keep listening. I circled it. I underlined it. I read it out loud. This sentence wasn't complicated. It didn't have rare words or complex grammar, but it reached something inside me I didn't know was waiting. It gave me permission to stop being perfect. It gave me a reason to keep going. That evening, I made a promise. One video, one notebook, one stubborn girl. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't make a post or join a challenge group. It was just me, my headphones, and that quiet decision. I would do this for 30 days. I would show up. I would listen, even if it didn't feel like progress, even if I didn't understand. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew I would get tired, bored, distracted, but I also knew something had shifted. The fear wasn't as loud anymore. There was something softer now. Something almost like hope. That night, before bed, I read the sentence one last time. You don't need to understand everything. You need to keep listening. I whispered it like a secret, folded the notebook closed, and turned off the light. Maybe this will work. Maybe this time I won't quit. By day 12, everything felt heavier. Work was draining me. Meetings ran long. Emails piled up and deadlines crept closer. I would come home, kick off my shoes, and collapse onto the couch. My brain was already foggy before I even opened YouTube, but I had promised myself, so I reached for my notebook. I slipped on my headphones and pressed play. The voice started, calm, steady, cheerful, but I wasn't in the mood. I couldn't focus. Every sentence felt like a riddle. I rewound 3 times. I still couldn't catch a simple phrase. My notes were sloppy, full of crossed out guesses and angry question marks. My head began to ache. My patience ran thin. I stared at the screen, willing the words to make sense. They didn't. I closed my laptop and dropped my face into my hands. For the first time since I began, I felt something rise in my chest that scared me. Defeat. I pulled out my journal and wrote the words I had never dared say before. This is useless. I don't speak English. The sentence looked ugly in ink, but it felt honest. I had tried this before, hadn't I? I remembered studying for the IELTS 2 years ago. I had done everything: textbooks, mock exams, speaking clubs. I scored well in reading and writing. But when it came to listening, I fell apart. I had failed before. I had given up before. The morning I saw my test results, I sat in the park for hours, just staring at the trees. People walked by, talking and laughing in English, and I felt like I was on the outside of something I desperately wanted to be part of. Now, on day 12, that same feeling came back, like I was chasing something I would never catch. I lay on my bed, headphones still around my neck, and closed my eyes. My room was silent, but my thoughts were loud. My headphones were silent, but my head was screaming, "What's the point? Why keep trying if I'm still not improving? Why torture myself?" Then, like a whisper from a distant corner of my mind, a memory surfaced, soft, unexpected. It was my old English teacher, Mrs. Lee. She once said something to me after class. When I stayed behind after failing a listening quiz, her voice had been gentle. Progress is not loud. It's slow. It's quiet. Most of the time, you won't even notice it's happening. At the time, I nodded, but I didn't believe her. Now, her words felt like a hand reaching through the fog. I sat up, reached for my notebook, opened to the very first page, and there it was, my sentence from day one. You don't need to understand everything. You need to keep listening. I ran my fingers over the ink. I remembered how proud I had felt that day, how that one line had lit something inside me. And I thought, if I give up now, I lose that spark. I erase all the hours I already gave to this. I didn't want to erase it. I didn't want to start over again someday and say, I could have made it if I had just kept going. So I took a deep breath, plugged in my headphones, and played the same video again. Not because I suddenly had motivation, not because I understood better now, rather because I refused to break the promise I had made to myself. This wasn't about English anymore. It was about not giving up on me. It happened on a Wednesday. I remember because I was working from my favorite cafe, the one with wooden tables and the smell of cinnamon in the air. My laptop was open, emails half written, coffee half drunk. I had my headphones on, but I had paused my music to think. That's when I heard just a voice from the cafe's TV in the background. I wasn't paying attention at first, but then something shifted. The voice was clear, calm, and cheerful. It was part of a travel show. The host was standing on a cliff with golden sunlight all around him, and he said, "If you want to see the best sunset, walk to the hill before 6 o'clock." That was it. One sentence, and I understood every single word. I didn't pause to translate it. I didn't whisper it back to myself to make sure. I didn't even blink. It just entered my ears and landed in my mind, whole and real and bright. For a second, I froze. I stared at the TV, heart suddenly pounding, like I had just won something I didn't know I had been competing for. My mouth opened slightly, my breath caught, and then out of nowhere, tears filled my eyes. It wasn't the most beautiful sentence. It wasn't complex. It didn't use advanced vocabulary or poetic structure. But it was mine. I had heard it. I had understood it instantly, fully, without fear, without effort. Understanding that sentence felt like standing on a cliff and seeing the sea for the first time. Wide, endless, waiting. A world I had been looking at from a distance, now suddenly reachable. I sat there, not moving, afraid the moment would slip away if I even breathed too loudly. Then I reached for my notebook. I turned to a blank page and wrote down the sentence word for word. I underlined it, dated it. I even drew a small sunset next to it. I wanted to remember exactly how this felt. Not just the sentence, but the heartbeat behind it. This wasn't a grammar victory. It wasn't about test scores or perfect pronunciation. It was something quieter, deeper. A silent milestone only I would ever see. Later that night, when I got home, I sat on my bed and opened the video from day one to the one about ordering coffee. I hadn't watched it since that first exhausting day. I expected to struggle again. I expected to feel overwhelmed. But as I listened, something strange happened. I understood not just words, but tone, rhythm, pauses. I caught the emotion behind the voices. I noticed things I hadn't heard before. The way the barista said, "Anything else?" with a friendly rise. The customer's polite laughter, the small sigh between "thank you" and "have a good day." I wasn't translating anymore. I wasn't even trying. I was simply receiving. Never had I felt so proud of something so small. That 2-minute video hadn't changed, but I had. Somewhere between day 1 and day 12, between the notebook and the tears, something inside me had shifted, slowly, quietly, invisibly. I had stopped trying to catch English like a falling object. I had started letting it reach me. I closed my notebook and turned off the light, but that sentence from the cafe stayed with me, repeating softly in my mind like a lullaby. If you want to see the best sunset, walk to the hill before 6 o'clock. It wasn't the language that had changed, it was me. Day 30 arrived like a quiet sunrise, without celebration, without applause. I woke up early, as I had for the past month, and opened my laptop. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't forcing myself anymore. It has become part of me now, this habit, this ritual, this quiet fight to listen without fear. I searched for a video longer than usual, 10 minutes. A casual vlog of someone describing their morning routine in New York. Nothing fancy, just footsteps, breakfast, background traffic, and soft narration. I hit play and I understood. Not everything, but enough. More than enough. I caught the transitions, the details, the tone behind the words. When she paused, I knew why. When she laughed, I heard the warmth. When she changed the topic, I didn't feel lost. I didn't panic. I didn't pause. I listened, and the world inside that video unfolded smoothly, like pages of a familiar book. I checked the time. I watched the whole thing without stopping, without subtitles, without guessing every word. I smiled, reached for my notebook, and instead of writing new vocabulary, I wrote something different. Day 30. I understand, not perfectly, but clearly enough to feel human inside the language. I closed the notebook, grabbed my bag, and walked to the little tea shop I used to visit during my early practice days. I ordered the same drink, brown sugar milk tea with pearls, and sat by the window. The first time I had come here, it was day 1. I was exhausted, frustrated, doubting everything. I had listened to one sentence over and over, just trying to believe I could do this. And now, here I was, day 30, same seat, same drink, but a different version of me. Later, I walked to the park. The trees were full, their shadows stretching gently across the path. Children played nearby. Dogs barked in the distance. I sat on a bench, sipping slowly, letting the afternoon wrap around me. A few minutes later, a man walked up. He looked lost, but kind, holding a phone and glancing around. He spoke, a little hesitant. "Excuse me, do you know how to get to the History Museum?" For a split second, the old panic knocked at my chest, but I didn't let it in. I stood up, smiled, and answered, "Yes, just walk straight for about 5 minutes. It's on the left, across from the library. You'll see a big red sign." I said it clearly, calmly, without needing to rehearse. The man smiled. "Thank you so much. Your English is very clear." I felt something bloom inside me, like warmth spreading from my ribs to my fingertips. Not because he complimented my English, but because I believed him. Because for the first time, I wasn't just trying to speak English. I was simply being in it. When I got home that evening, I didn't turn on a video. I didn't review grammar. I didn't test myself. I just opened my journal and wrote, Day 31, Start Podcast Training, because this wasn't the end. 30 days had brought me here, but there was more ahead. Not harder, just deeper. I didn't want to stop. I wanted to keep going. Not to prove something, but because now it was part of who I was. Learning English hadn't just changed the way I listened, it changed the way I believed in myself. I sat on my bed, notebook in hand, remembering that girl on day 1, the one who rewound the same sentence 10 times, the one who cried in cafes and felt like she didn't belong. She's still me, but something in her has shifted. She wasn't fluent yet, but she wasn't afraid anymore. And that, I think, is where true understanding begins. Not in the words, but in the silence between them.